We're joined on INSEAD Knowledge by Alan Wang, your founder and CEO of babytree.com. This website is basically a Facebook for parents who have young children, babies, and you have something like 12 million unique visitors a month now, and that's just within a few short years. How have you done that?
We indeed, Babytree aimed to target young Chinese parents with children 0 to 6. And in our estimation, there are roughly 40 to 50 million parents falling into that age brackets with children in that age brackets. So we are effectively targeting and reaching probably 1/3 of that population. We don't really have a secret ingredient in terms of actually why we're growing so quickly and to such a scale. Two of the things I want to point out. One is paying very, very detailed attention to product details. Not so much product innovation in terms of actually new things and new features I've never seen before, but paying things they see and use every day, but just make them a little bit better than other services actually they used to. For example, uploading pictures is one of our key features. Today, the total number of pictures stored on Babytree is approaching 100 million. And that number makes us the largest photo deposit sites in China for young parents.
That will make the site pretty sticky as
well. That makes the site certainly very sticky. One of the things that's actually we early on found that if you only enable people to upload one picture at a time, they became very easily frustrated because in an average week, now armed with digital cameras, they can take a few hundred, if not a few thousand pictures of their children. So we decided actually to give them the right to simultaneously upload more pictures. However, if you turn the volume up too much, for example, enabling them to upload 200 pictures, this becomes in their mind unmanageable, even though it's easy. So we fine-tuned the number. Finally, we arrived at an optimal number, which is 50, which is easy, scalable on the one hand, on the other hand, manageable and in control, at least from a perception of the user perspective. So paying attention to details. Number two, driving word of mouth. We haven't really been spending marketing dollars at all. Average month, we spend less than 10,000 US dollars in marketing. It's probably a fraction of that right now. But we pay attention to get our people to introduce and talk about Babytree in places actually where people aggregate. For example, in chat rooms online. We also host offline events. So that's actually how I think this site has been taking off like that.
And it's not an advice site as you would get in the States, say with Baby Center.
You can do three things mainly. You can definitely get medical expertise from our board of expert opinion holders. These are largely doctors. But you can do actually two more things which you cannot do on Baby Center, which is the world-leading parenting site. One is documenting people's lives and their own lives, their children's growth, via blogs, diaries, and BBS chats, and so on and so forth. So that enables people to actually form a community, and from that community perspective, they fall into friendships with each other. Number two, actually buy things. In this case, actually, we're not giving them a shopping mall. We're giving them just the product actually they want now on a community site, which is actually DIY products. You know, printing baby's pictures on the surface of a mug, printing baby pictures actually in an album or on the chest of t-shirts. So things actually that are naturally associated with raising a baby with lots of pictures stored on our site in their own box.
You got something like 10 million US from a venture capital fund in the States,
yes.
Matrix,
yes.
For the initial founding of the company. Are you going to be looking for more money, or is this the sum that you need at the moment?
We successfully raised 2 rounds of funding from Matrix, which became known worldwide for backing companies such as Apple and Intel in early years. We have not decided whether we're going to raise more money because actually just standing alone as a media-backed website, we are profitable as is today. But it depends on our future strategy and expansion plan. So that does actually depend on where we go and how big is our impression, how wide-scoped our ambition is.
Any likelihood then of going for an IPO?
It is certainly possible. I think we're actually fast reaching certain scale in terms of revenue and profitability that makes it a possible exit for the company. But it is not a top agenda actually in my mind. I think actually our first and foremost agenda is to push it even bigger in terms of the reach and our coverage. There are, after all, 15 million babies born each year in China. Times 6, we're talking about actually 100 million families with a kid every year falling into our age range. And many of them in the coming years will get online. So the total population falling in this age range will quickly exceed 70, 80, 90 million. And we are still reaching just a small fraction of that population. I think while we are on one hand is profitable, we have to really focus our attention on building better products even to attract this population, getting a lion's share of this population online using our site. So that's our first and foremost task. And going IPO, frankly speaking, is actually not a top agenda for us.
You have started generating revenue from advertising. I saw a figure of $3 million over the past year. And that's mainly from, as I understand it, multinational companies looking to sell baby products in China.
It is true. The only part is actually I want to give you a bigger picture is actually in our mix, multinational companies account for about 60% of revenue, and the rest are from actually domestic manufacturers. But all of them are baby goods manufacturers, and they are large manufacturers. So I think actually our task, not only to tap into that population, but also to tap into middle and small scale, the SMEs, and small to medium sized businesses, who have a even bigger total collective spending with baby goods and baby services than these kind of head guys account for. Our answer is actually to potentially go local, meaning manufacture subdivisions of the website, catering to local populations, solving more local issues. So for example, if I'm in Beijing, the answer to what do I do when my kid actually has a high fever should not stop at, seek a doctor's opinion. These are the 4 possible reasons, so on and so forth, but should say, I recommend you to go to this particular hospital around this hour, seek the opinion from the following 3 doctors who are all experts in the area.
You come from a background whereby you worked for P&G, but then you've also worked for Yahoo.
Yes.
In Asia. You've worked for Google in Asia as Chief Marketing Officer. Is that basically one of the reasons behind your success? Is that you have that internet knowledge to start with? I mean, that must be a big advantage over your competitors.
I think to some degree, the part I do agree is actually my experiences at P&G, Yahoo, and my last professional large-scale experiences with Google in Asia. They all have taught me many things, among which, paying attention to your users, which is P&G's mantra of consumer advertising, and then launching many products and launch them early and test them against your users, which is the Google launch many, launch early philosophy. But I have to say, all of those actually combined are not adequate to win in China. And I'm still learning this part, which is to act very fast, learn the local ways, and compete effectively with a low budget against scrappy entrepreneurs who are just ready to do anything you could imagine to take over the leadership position from your site.
Why is it, though, that so many multinational companies haven't fared very well when it comes to the internet in China? And Google is an obvious example. I mean,
Google lags behind Baidu. Yahoo exited the market 5 years ago. AOL entered Chinese market 3-4 times and pulled out each and every time. Amazon acquired a local company, and immediately 1 year after the acquisition, that local company went from #1 position market share-wise to #2. So indeed, I think people do see this phenomenon of international companies coming into China armed with cash, people, and a lot of ambition, and fail a few years after entry. I think there are a lot of angles that you can sort of ponder about this sort of phenomenon. I think fundamentally from my perspective, having worked both at Yahoo and Google, certainly at Yahoo from a US perspective, Google from a more of a local perspective, is that talents they use seems to be talents that can easily bridge the communication gap, but not necessarily talents who can fight and win in the local environment. For example, when they hired me, certainly I'm a fluent English speaker, educated in the US. And that part, I think, makes me a strong candidate, bridging communication gap for both companies, Yahoo and Google. On the other hand, when they hired me, I hardly had any local knowledge, how to win in a Chinese market, and particularly when that market is armed with people who understand the international scale and innovations. On the other hand, they are really scrappy and fast-running entrepreneurs, locally born, locally educated. So I think actually, what kind of people you use? Do you have the courage to open up your floodgate and say, let me actually recruit people I may not know very well, but they have proved themselves actually as tough and successful people running local businesses versus actually people who are educated in the West who have relatively very low local knowledge. I think that's a key part. The other part is actually, I think, ownership. When you go to China, competition breaks out between local entrepreneur-owned companies. There are startups, there are owners, there are founders, versus a professional team of people that represent the Chinese interest for these internet companies, who have, on the other hand, very little ownership, therefore very little equity in winning the battle. So I think actually these two things, using the right people, giving them the right incentive, probably explain to some degree, to a large degree in my mind, why companies actually like international and global giants have not fared so well.
You've used the term scrappy a couple of times
right.
in the interview so far, and I'm just wondering what precisely you mean by it. It almost has a sort of street fighting connotation that you basically at a very low level,
yeah,
you're having to do almost anything it takes to win.
Scrappy in my mind, actually I use the term so often, both actually in Chinese translation as well as in English. People do ask me this term very much. I think scrappy does bring up the connotation of not respecting the current rules of the game, not respecting the quote-unquote authorities, fighting with very little resource, but fighting smartly in the Chinese trench warfare. Scrappy also means doing things and breaking down barriers and finding very guerrilla tactics. And for example, when I graduated from P&G, the only thing I knew about is marketing campaigns backed by $100 million a year spending. And when I got to Yahoo, which is actually in the US, I was armed with $3 million US. And I said, boy, $3 million cannot do anything. And then a few years after that, at Google in China, we had even a smaller budget. But if you look at actually what spending, marketing level wise, the local companies are spending, $1 million would be a luxury. So how do you actually innovate with little resource, with basically nothing for you, but it's just your determination and way of doing things? I think that kind of spirit I've seen many times in many people in the US, I've seen many times in many local Chinese, but when foreign companies come to China, they are viewed, or they view themselves as big and established entities. You know, when Google comes to Beijing, they build a beautiful and glorious building complex. I would not do something like that. I would put my people in crampy little corners and say, fight for 2 years, and prove to yourself actually you deserve a huge office complex. Right. That's actually what I mean.
Alan Wang, CEO and founder of babytree.com, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.